with this system is that all 4 city council members at the time were all Republican, and all 4 city council members at the time were of Caucasian ethnicity, right? And we know from living in El Cajon that El Cajon is extremely diverse, a large group of Latinos, a large group of Middle Eastern, a large refugee and immigrant population, and a strong amount of African American and API, right? But none of that was reflected in the city council.
All men, no women. No women.
And no, one woman, Sarah, one Star Bales, one woman, but now no women, right? Here are the benefits of us moving forward to district elections. District elections are going to divide the city into 4 districts, okay? That has been set. There will be 4 districts and the mayor, so you have 5 on the city council. The city council candidates would run to represent a specific district, and a candidate would have to live in the district that they represent, okay? Which means we're not gonna have the issue we had with it being at large. At large, we saw that all 4 lived in the same neighborhood. Moving to district elections is going to make sure that each city council representative represents their district, okay? Represents the neighborhood, which means you get to elect someone that lives in your neighborhood, right? That represents your neighborhood, knows your neighborhood, understands your neighborhood, and is going to have your best interest at heart. And like I mentioned, this is the best way it's going to affect us, is representation. Representation and diversity is key to moving to district elections. For example, if your community, or I'll give a real life example. El Cajon's Latino population is 28%, right? Right now, it's 28% as a whole. Moving to district elections, depending on how you cut your district, you could then have 37% Latino in one district, right? So you get a greater representation that's more reflective of the community. So this is what we're proposing. We have worked, this coalition called Unified Communities, who I'm a part of, Mr. Jesus Pacheco is a part of, who Eva Pacheco is a part of, have a coalition called Unified Communities. And what this coalition has done is we've been meeting for the past couple months on creating a map that would have empowerment districts, okay? These are an example of empowerment districts. It's a line-drawn body that can use different kinds of districts to empower historically disenfranchised communities. There are 4 types of districts. A line-drawn body can utilize to ensure that the racial, ethnic, and language minorities are offered an equal opportunity to participate in the jurisdiction elections. This is from the CVRA work of California, which is the California Voting Rights Act. The California Voting Rights Act, CVRA, requires that when you are doing districting, that you do have representation, that you do have empowerment districts, that we aren't gerrymandering, that we aren't disfranchising historically underrepresented communities. I'm not a fan personally of the word minority, but it's the language that's used in CVRA within the California Voting Rights Act. But we know that we are not the minority. We know that we are just underrepresented and we are underserved, right? And so what we've done with the map is we move forward with a coalition district. The reality is, as large as El Cajon is, it's 28% Latino, 8% African American, 6% API, and 3% other, 1% Native American. Now, those numbers that I just gave you came from the census data of 2010. So they're not the most current, but it's the only hard data that we have to utilize to move forward. The other thing is, on the census, there is not a check mark for Iraqi, or for Somalian, or for Syrian, right? So we do have a large group of Middle Eastern residents that aren't reflected in the numbers that I just gave, right? But because with those numbers, we know that we can't have one district that has a large Latino vote of over 50%. because there's not enough, right? There's not enough African Americans to have a district where the majority vote is African Americans. And the same thing with the API and so forth and so forth. So what we've decided as a coalition is to move forward with a coalition district, which is where you take different groups of different ethnic backgrounds and they come together to make a majority-minority district, okay? So you take the 28% Latino, you take the 8% African American, you take the 6% API, 3% other, you put them all together and you get your 50% plus 1, okay? So we want to make sure that when the city cuts the maps and does the districting lines, that they don't cut the lines where each district has a majority white vote. Because if the districts have a majority white vote, what's going to happen is we're going to see that represented in city council, where we're not going to have diversity, and we're not going to have representation from our communities of color, okay? So we are advocating for a coalition district. This is when two racial, ethnic, or language minority groups can be combined to form a majority of the district. Are there any questions so far before I move forward? Because I know that was a lot of information. ¿Hay preguntas? Y puedes preguntar en español si quieres. Any questions so far? Okay. So here's a little background on what the city has done since they passed Measure S in November. The city has hired their own demographer. A demographer is someone that actually comes in to do the line drawing. The company is called National Demographic Corps, NDC, and they are nonpartisan. They aren't Republican, they're not Democrat, they're not working to favor the city council, they're working to do what's best for the city as a whole and to make sure that community is involved in the process, right? But they are not CVRA, they are not California Voting Rights Act. So they're not necessarily focusing on making sure that there's majority and minority districts. So she asked how come the candidates aren't involved in this discussion and if there were candidates that we could already vote for. And so what I let her know is that because the district lines have not been cut and agreed on yet, we have no idea where the districts are going to fall and which current city council members would live within those districts. But we do know that a seat is opening up in 2018, so we'll get to vote for one seat in 2018, and then 2 seats will open up in 2020. So there will be an opportunity for, however the districts are cut in your district, to pick someone in your neighborhood or advocate for someone or support someone that you feel best represents your district or neighborhood. Good question. Muy buena pregunta. Otra vez. So when they draw those district lines, everybody has to have an equal number of voters within their district. Nobody will have over 25,000 voters. The city as a whole has 100,000 voters, roughly. So each one will be cut between 24 and 25,000 people. What could possibly happen and what we think will happen after 2018 or after the lines are cut is 2 city council members would be in one district. And then that would cause for a whole other plethora of policies to make sure that, for example, what happened in El Cajon was recently is they wanted to pass a law saying that each council member had to have another council member approve their agenda item. And that goes against CVRA. It goes completely against the California Voting Rights Act. And the ACLU saw that this was illegal and jumped on it and let them know that this is not okay. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to things like that as we move forward, that they aren't trying to change or play the system or give power to one or take power from another. Okay, great question. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to show you all the map that we have created, and I'll break down the demographics. They hired the National Demographic Corps, and they came in and they taught 4 workshops, which was really great. They actually taught the workshops in the community for residents to learn how to make their own map, right? So like I said, they were really nonpartisan. They were really trying to work with the city and also work with the community, right? So they were teaching community how to use the map, and they gave community an opportunity to submit their own map. Now, of course, making your own map is very difficult because people don't always understand that you need an equal amount of voters. They may not understand different school districts, or making sure that you have certain highways or certain emergency services, right? So it's a little difficult, but they did the best that they can to educate and empower community to create their own map. And through this process, 18 maps were submitted from the community, right? And as of 4 days ago, 19 maps were submitted because the coalition we've been working with, the coalition Jesus Pacheco's a part of, submitted their own map as well. So now 19 maps have been submitted, and the actual National Demographic Forum that was hired submitted 3 maps that they think, right? And we'll have an opportunity, and I'll go into that later, to look at all the other maps and see how they compare. But what we did was submit our own map following the California voting rights rules, right? We wanted to make sure that we had the coalition district. We wanted to make sure that we had majority minority. And all the maps that have been submitted do not have a majority minority, right? Except for ours. Not only does ours have 1, it has 2 of the 4 districts, a majority minority. So this is the map that we've created. This would be District 1 here. I know it looks fairly large, se mira muy grande, but it only has less than 25,000 voters. You have District 2 here, again, also has less than 25,000 voters. And then you have District 3 and 4. Now 3 and 4 are the majority minority districts, and I'll break down the numbers.
Shit, I need to move.
But District 1 here has a majority white vote, with about 60% being Caucasian. And then 2 as well, above 50 white votes. But 3 and 4, combining the multiple different ethnic communities of color,
makes sense,
we were able to get a majority minority where people of color are the majority vote in District 3 and 4, right? So we have equality. And I'll break down the demographics. It might be a little small here, so I'll read it off on you. I'll read it off for you. As I mentioned, District 1 had over 60%. You see here, District 1's population is 25,205. The Hispanic vote is 20%. The white vote is 68%. The black is 4%. And the API is, the Asian American is 5%. Then District 2 here, you have 24,992. 24% being Latino, 63% being white, 5% black vote, and then 5% API, right? This is where we get our majority minority districts in District 3 and 4. 3, you have 24,501, with 34% Hispanic, 49% white, 9% black, and 6% Asian American. District 4, 24,780, 35% Hispanic, 47% white, 9% black, 6% Asian American. So combining all the communities of color, they would then be the majority of the vote.
What about the Chaldeans?
So Chaldeans, remember, all this data comes from it's based off the 2010 census data. It's the closest and the only data we have for now.
Until the next census. Yeah.
And Chaldeans don't have an actual checkbox, so a lot of them associate themselves as white.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that there's still discrepancies in these numbers, but that's going to be common in all data provided by the state, the federal, or the city. So one example of this is the Registrar of Voters. If you don't mark your ethnicity, they can select an ethnicity for you. This is where it gets tricky though. La Jolla is predominantly white, right?
Look at
We
you.
know that.
You black and Latina, but you call yourself
It's like
black.
90-something% white. And so if you have a last name like Wilson, which could be African American, it could be Caucasian, but you live in a predominantly white neighborhood and you didn't mark African American, they would check you as Caucasian, right? Same thing happens in Mira Mesa and National City, where you have a lot of Filipino and Mexicans who have very similar last names like Gutierrez. But if you live in Mira Mesa, where it's largely API community, Asian Pacific Islander, you didn't check that you were Latino, what would happen is they could mark you as API, right? So the data has always been a little miscued, yeah. I remember one time when I was first getting into voting rights and voter education, it said that there was, out of the 6%, 168,000 African Americans in the city of San Diego, only 20,000 of them were registered to vote. And I was like, wait, I think I'm reading this article wrong. This can't be right? And then they just pulled from improper data, right? But this is the closest data that we can get. The great thing about districting is you'll have to redraw the lines when the new census data comes out, right? So the new census data will come out in 2018, right? 2020?
2018.
2021? 2021?
Really?
So when we do the redistricting and you get new census data, you have to redraw the lines with all the new ethnic groups, with all the new voting age population. Because remember, they base districting too on not just population, but they do a lot of the data based off voter registration. CVRA's, the California Voting Rights Act, does it based off voter. So for those that are under 18 right now, when it's time to do redistricting, they'll be over 18 and eligible to vote, right? So they'll have to redraw the lines to include them into the population as well, okay? But the point that we're fighting for with our unified communities map is to make sure that we're advocating for at least 2 majority-minority districts, because we want representation. We want people on the city council that look like us. We want Latinos, we want Middle Easterns, we want women, we want men, we want a mix of Republicans and Democrats and liberals. We don't want what we have now, 5 Republicans.
That kind of addresses her concern of we just get one of us and there's still 3 of them. So this map says we have a better chance of getting 2 to 2.
Yes, and the other thing is too, and this is a great example for El Cajon, is like with the Alfred Olango shooting. For those of you who know, there was an African who was killed by the police in El Cajon. And there was nobody to really hold accountable, right? A lot of the city council members were saying, and quote, it didn't happen in my neighborhood. Even though they are city council members that represent the city, they said it didn't happen in my neighborhood, right? So there's nobody really to hold accountable. Now let's say we had district elections and that situation took place within a district. Then you have a city council person that you can directly contact, you can directly apply pressure to, you can call them out and urge them to do something. You also have, once you move to district elections, police officers that are assigned to that district, that work within those precincts, that work within that district. So again, you can have that accountability, you know who to target, you know who to talk to, you know who to go to when there's an issue in your neighborhood, when there's an issue in your community. You have one person to continuously hold accountable and to continuously apply pressure to and to continuously be in communication with, right?
Can I just say something about being in communication? It also means that we would have someone who knows what's being discussed inside those buildings that can be responsible to us and tell us what we need to know, how things are.
Exactly. For those of you who didn't hear what she said, she was saying that one great part about the communication is that there's somebody on the inside who's hearing what's happening, what the mayor's saying, what the city manager is doing, what the chief of police is saying and doing, and they can relay that message back to their community, right? More transparency, more honesty, okay? So we want to continue to advocate for a majority minority district, right? Because what we don't want to happen is what we see now with an at-large system, which is a city council that does not represent our issues, that isn't going to stand up for what's important for us. In El Cajon specifically, there's a large immigrant and refugee community, and we know that with the current administration on a national level, there's been an attack on immigrant and refugee communities. So we want to make sure that we have city council members that are going to stand up for immigrants, that are going to stand up for refugees, that are going to stand up for women's rights, that are going to stand up for healthcare, that are going to help with the homeless situation, that are going to stand up for social justice issues, that are going to demand criminal justice reform. And we know that the only way we're going to get someone that's going to stand up for those issues is someone that's impacted by those issues. And so we need to make sure that we have people in office that look like us, that are from our neighborhoods, that live on the block. We see them, they see us, right? That we have access to, and that we can, at the end of the day, hold accountable. That's going to be key when moving to district elections, is having someone to hold accountable, right? Any questions so far before I move forward?
It sounds pretty informative and everything else, but in the community, like, let's say, is there anyone that is being educated or is being pushed towards that goal by getting people
Towards the majority minority? Yeah, great question. So one thing that the coalition is doing is holding these informational meetings. This is one way. So there will be another one on Saturday, and we'll have flyers for you so that you can invite neighbors, friends, families who would, want to be a part of this issue. And as I'll go to my next slide, I'll give a timeline of how else you can help the issue. The other thing that's happening is I'm in direct communication with the National Demographic Corps, and the demographer. And the demographer that we worked with to create our map is really, really, really good friends with the demographer that helped the city make their map. And so he's already putting a bug in their ear saying, hey, we really want majority minority districts. We really want the city council to go forward with majority minority districts. The other thing is I'm also in communication with Brett Channing, who is the assistant to the city manager who is running this project. It is his baby. And he made sure that our map was submitted. He made sure that our map was looked over. So we have the connections with the city council to make sure that the map is going to be reviewed, that the map will be available for others to look at. The biggest thing we need to do now is gain more support for the map, and then turn out to the upcoming meetings where we get to review the map, advocate for a map, and then vote for a map, okay? So that's gonna be the biggest. At the end of the day, and this may sound cliche, is people power. The more folks we have advocating, they cannot ignore us. The more people we have from the community, from every sector, and that's why the coalition is called Unified Communities, because within the coalition there's Latinos, there's API, there's African American, and there's Middle Eastern. There's a little bit of every group saying we're coming together, not as the blacks, not as the Latinos, not as the Middle Easterns, but we're coming together as communities of color. We're coming together as oppressed communities. We're coming together as marginalized communities, disenfranchised communities, and saying enough's enough. We want representation one way or another. And if we gotta come together to get it, we gotta come together to get it. And so pressure is going to be key. Telling your friends and neighbors, coming out to the city council meeting, and I'll go through the timeline, telling them, come out, support this map, support this coalition, support this issue, is going to be key to us getting a map that has majority minority districts. Yeah. But we're definitely talking to city council, and we're working with the National Demographic Corps to make sure our voices are heard. Good question. So I'll go to my final slide here, which is the timeline. So there's going to be 2 public hearings in the city of El Cajon. It will be May 9th at 7 o'clock and May 23rd. I don't have the time for the one on May 23rd yet, but if you left your contact information on our sign-in sheet, I'll make sure to email you the flyer, and I'll make sure to email you all the date, time, and address of City Council for the hearings. But what we want to do is go out on May 9th, as many people as we can, and advocate for the map that we created, and make sure that we say, we are choosing this map because it has 2 majority-minority districts. We are choosing this map because it has equality. We are choosing this map because it has equal representation. We are choosing this map because it gives our community a voice. We are choosing this map because it gives us an opportunity to have someone in office that looks like us, that represents our issues. We are advocating for a majority-minority district. We don't want we don't want districts where the majority vote in every district belongs to white people, because we're gonna have what we see now. 4 city council members that are güero, that don't reflect our issues, that don't reflect our communities, right? We want diversity. We want an opportunity. So we want to turn out on May 9th. We want to turn out again on May 23rd. And then on June 13th, there's going to be an opportunity to vote on the map. The City Council will vote, the National Demographic Corps will be there, and the community will be there, okay?
Is that gonna be on the 13th?
So it will be public where people can come, but it will be a vote for the city councils,
Just to see, right?
just to see. But if it doesn't go our way, we make noise. We make a little havoc, cause a little chaos. The reason why it says June 13th or June 27th is there's a law in place where if there is tampering with May 9th or May 23rd, then they will add a 3rd hearing. So let's say no community members come out May 9th, not one single community member. They're going to add a 3rd hearing, right? And do more outreach. If they add a 3rd hearing, the vote will be pushed to June 27th. As of now, there is no 3rd hearing. So you have May 9th, May 23rd, the vote on June 13th. If a 3rd hearing is added, the vote would be moved to June 27th. So that's why it says or, okay? Does that make sense? I forget exactly what the number of the law is called, but it has a list of conflicts is what they call. If a city council member is out on May 9th, then that would be considered a conflict, so they would add another hearing. And there's a bunch of different things that are considered conflicts that could possibly add a 3rd public hearing. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
¿Se lo puede decir en inglés? Esta es la razón por la que el Cajon, siempre dicen que el Cajon y la migra, la policía, trabajan juntos. ¿Por qué es esa cosa?
Oh, dice que no. Now, if that would be one of the reasons why the migra and police work together.
Es only el Cajon, dicen, no estoy segura si es ¿por qué solamente el Cajon aquí en San Diego?
Okay, so you're asking a question that's not necessarily related to districting. Why is it that the police officers and immigration work together?
Yeah.
Okay.
But she's saying, like, for example, because the city council is all white. It's also, if that will be one of the reasons.
Yes. Well, okay, so
Or is related.
this is interesting. So what you see happening now is happening across the state. Okay, so it's not special just to El Cajon or exclusive to El Cajon and San Diego County. What's happening is we do see local law enforcement working with federal agents like CBP, the Customs Border Patrol, right? Or ICE agents. And at the moment, because of what's happening on a federal, because of our current administration and the order and direction that he's giving CBP agents and ICE agents, he has given access at the moment for them to utilize local law enforcement. One thing that California is doing is a bill called SB 54. And what SB 54 is, it's a bill that says you cannot use local law enforcement resources for CBP or ICE agents' agenda, right? Which means that they can't use any of the data that local law enforcement has, any data on stops or past, crimes or convictions that SDPD or the El Cajon PD has. They can no longer use any of that information, ICE agents and CBP.
So
They
they
can
can't
no
target
longer
you.
use them to help with traffic, to help stop traffic, prevent traffic. They can't use them at all. They can't call on them. They cannot use resources from. So it's making a clear-cut wall and border between, what a word. It's making a clear-cut line saying local law enforcement over here, federal agents over here. Because the reality is too, the access that federal agents have is unconstitutional for local law enforcement to have. So like local law enforcement, I have certain rights, right? I have the right to remain silent. I have, I can request a search warrant, right? They do it, but they can't blatantly say, I stopped you because you're black. They can't use racial profiling and say, oh, I stopped them because they were black, right? That's a lawsuit. But CBP, they have all that. CBP can legally stop you because they think you're undocumented or because they think that you don't have papers, right? They don't need a search warrant. They can question your documentation status at any point, right? You don't have the right to attorney. You don't have the right to remain silent. So we want to make sure that local law enforcement, they don't have that power, right? Because they're the ones that we're going to deal with every day, 24/7. We want to make sure that there's a clear line where you keep federal agents over here, you keep local law enforcement over here, right? The good thing is, how this can tie into districting elections is you cut into districts and you have a certain unit of police officers that work within this district, right? If we feel at any point that these officers are not working with the community, are not respecting the community, are racial profiling, are discriminating against us, we have an elected official, a city council person that we can target, that we can go to and express our concerns, right? Instead of 4 that don't live in our neighborhood saying, I don't live there, it's not my neighborhood, right? Which is what we saw happen. Question.
La otra cosa es que la ciudad donde se tiene representantes diversos, ¿verdad? La ciudad puede, por ejemplo, poner una ordenanza, le dicen, por ejemplo, de que la ciudad da la bienvenida a todo el mundo, o que es un santuario. Pero si no tenemos nosotros ahí poder, si nadie ahí nos representa, jamás van a ellos a firmar una ordenanza de que es toda la gente bienvenida o que es un santuario. Nunca. If we have some power in the city council, they can work in an ordinance to declare the city a welcoming city or the sanctuary city, something like that, for example.
Okay. So that was the end of my presentation. I wanted to make sure that you had the history to Measure S, which has moved us forward to districting elections. Wanted to make sure you knew what the city has been doing, working with a national demographic board to help them move to district elections. There are people like myself, organizations like myself that are doing this work. There's another organization called PANA that is doing this work in the refugee and Middle Eastern community. ACLU has been working with us as well and assisting us. Jesus Pacheco and CSA in El Cajon has been working with us. So there are a lot of organizations out here making sure that the information is getting out. Like I said, we will have another meeting, exact same presentation, this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11, right here in this auditorium. So if you know people that are interested or you want people to get involved in this fight as well, make sure that you let them know Saturday to come out. And like I said, all those that signed in and left your emails, I'll make sure to email you my personal contact, so you can always contact me if you have any other questions. And also want to make sure you get the flyer for Saturday, and I will also send this PowerPoint and the map. So you'll have access to all of that. None of this is secret. None of this is, you know, we're not hiding anything. So if you have questions on the map, if you have questions on the demographics, please call me. I'm completely open to answer any questions. And if I don't know the answer, I will find the answer and get back to you. Okay? So that's it for my presentation. I thank you all so much for coming.